So, I have a lot of resurrection stories, and some of them are actually pretty huge. If you've been at this church for a while, you've heard one that's very big. Another example is that I'm really good friends with my ex-husband's second wife, and I'm actually godmother to their daughter, which actually, got us on the radio to talk about our story. So I thought about telling these stories, but here's the thing. Sometimes those big, huge stories, the ones that, for example, get you on the radio to tell your story like we did, become less meaningful and less impactful because we hear them and we say, well, that could never be me. I'm never going to be best friends with my ex-husband's new wife or a caregiver and lover to their child. And so you kind of tune out, like, that's not me. So I'd rather tell you about a resurrection story that's just a small moment in time, a super small resurrection of one evening, a resurrection of a mindset and a heart and a soul just for one night, because we all have those, and it's just a matter of paying attention and telling our stories so that we remember. So, this night, it was a few months into my separation from my first husband. My daughter was 3-ish, and I was barely keeping it together. I was trying to put up a front for her sake to make sure she knew that all was well. But of course, all wasn't. My world had upended. I was trying to figure out how I was going to earn a living by myself. I was trying to sell our marital home by myself. I was hanging on by a thread. At that time, our custody status was that he would have her on Wednesday nights, and that time was precious to me because it was the only time I had to myself to either just be by myself or let my guard down and not have to put on a front that everything's cool and okay, or just chill. And this particular night, like many, his work got in the way, and the time for him to pick her up went on and passed, and as it's passing, my rage and frustration and self-pity were all increasing in exponential numbers until finally he asked if it'd be okay if I had dropped her off at his office in downtown Durham. And at this point, I'm just done. I'm like, I hate the world. I hate everyone. Sure, I'll drop her off, but as soon as I do, I'm swinging by the ABC store. I'm getting some vodka. I might even go to the mini mart and get some cigarettes, and I'm just gonna have a really mature coping mechanism evening for my rage, grief, sadness, lostness, and all of that. And that was my plan. And so I'm driving my daughter to her dad's office in downtown Durham, and we had to pass Westminster Presbyterian Church, and it clearly, some kind of trash truck had a massive accident outside their church because their entire lawn was covered with just like a foot of trash. It was noticeable and crazy. And I'm driving in my rage and self-pity, and I went, oh, bummer for them. So I dropped my kid off. I've got my plan. I'm going to have my very mature, unhealthy response to all my negative emotions. And I'm driving past the church again on my way home. And there's this one solitary little old lady. I don't know if she was the church secretary, but she was out there by herself picking up trash. And I went, bummer for her, and I kept on driving, and then a near audible voice just was like, you need to turn around and you need to go help her. And I went, no, because God loves a cheerful giver. And I kept driving, and the voice got more adamant, and so did I, and there were a lot of expletives, and I was like, no, and bleep, no, bleep, 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 no. And finally, I probably got about a half a mile of wrestling with the angel like Jacob, and finally it just got too much, and I just went, fine, and I flipped the car 180 in the middle of the road, and I just roared back to the church with just filled with rage, because, you know, God loves a cheerful giver. And I got out of my car and I started helping this woman pick up this trash, which was truly probably the most repulsive thing I've ever done. And I used to clean kennels for a living back in the day. I mean, this was like picking up used full diapers that weren't wrapped with my bare hands, chicken bones that had goop on them with my bare hands, like so repulsive. And it was one of the most holy things I've ever done. I mean, I could literally, as the hour went by, like feel my blood pressure drop, feel my attitude change, feel death, being resurrected to life. And pretty soon 2 other strangers pulled off to the side of the road and joined us. And then pretty soon the pastor came out of the church and was like, "Who are you people? You don't even go to this church. You should go to this church." And I mean, I can't explain it. I'm still, 16 years later, still moved by how powerful that resurrection moment was. So my plans for the evening, my plans of death-dealing, very terribly immature responses were gone, and life was here. And that is a resurrection moment. And so I would encourage all of you, especially in this time of the pandemic where the days just bleed into each other, to think about those small moments, because sometimes that's all we have. Sometimes that's what a life is built on. Not all of us have huge dramatic stories. How can we look at, I mean, even just seeing the sun, what feels like 40 days of gray and rain, how does that bring new life out of death? How does a reconciliation and peaceful evening after a dust-up with your spouse or your kids, how is that a resurrection moment? Because let's face it, it's those small moments that make up a life, as long as we pay attention.